Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you here today with an article from March 31st. And this is from Red State. It is called Absolutely Wild Details About How Democrats Covered Up Biden's Decline Reveal a Historic Scandal. And we're seeing all this stuff come out recently about all these journalists now are writing books about how Biden was really incapacitated. And they're acting like, nobody noticed when, we all did. And we had been since before he was even elected in bunny ears president. So let's go ahead and see what is going on here. And there's the dementia-addled man right there. It says, just when you think you've heard everything there is to hear about how Democrats covered up Joe Biden's dramatic physical and cognitive decline as president, there's more. As Red State recently reported, there was a point late in his ill-fated re-election campaign when Biden's handlers had to use fluorescent tape on the floor to keep him from wandering off during a speaking engagement. I mean, imagine that. And nobody noticed that? I don't remember anybody talking about that. I don't remember seeing anything come up anywhere of reporters saying, hey, there's tape on the ground. You figured at least someone who was, not a mainstream media shill would notice that and actually say something, but I never saw that. Anywho, let's keep going. It says, that was revealed in a new book entitled Fight, Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, and more excerpts have been released. One incident involved Representative Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, with Biden seemingly not knowing who the congressman was. He then had to coach the former president into remembering him. I'm not surprised people don't know who Eric Swalwell is because he's extremely forgettable. He's one of the dumbest people in Congress. So Swalwell had not been invited to the White House often, like most members of Congress, but when Biden and Swalwell came face to face, Biden didn't immediately recognize the congressman, according to the book. Swalwell needed to note personal details to remind Biden of who he is. Yeah, so it's already going pretty well, huh? So Swalwell may not have been the most well-known politician out there, but he had been a fairly visible part of the Democratic Party for over a decade, including meeting Biden face-to-face several times. I imagine that was correct, but, when you have dementia, unfortunately, you don't recognize people as easily. Even someone like Eric Swalwell. So the former president not knowing who the congressman was should have been a major red flag, major times 10 red flag, but the cover-up took precedence over everything, and everyone involved stayed quiet on the matter, which is pretty incredible. It says in another part of the book, one of Biden's former aides shared how they would use a makeup artist to cover up how deteriorated his physical appearance had become. And from Stephen L. Miller, who I definitely would say follow, he's a pretty funny guy, very sarcastic on X, says they were literally Michael Jacksoning him while the media called people who said he didn't look right cheap fakes. Yeah, remember that. Remember when everybody went against the narrative, you had Karine Jean-Pierre up there saying either he was fine or these pictures are cheap fakes. And even it says here in this embedded tweet from The Hill that he wrote, it says, at the G7 summit in Italy preceding the debate, Biden was tired when he arrived, and in most of the sessions, a Biden aide told Parnes and Allen. It says to cover up the physical signs of Biden's aging, a makeup artist met with him in the morning when he traveled. The artist also covered up aging signs before Zoom calls with his aides. And he consistently made these makeup appointments, which is a bit ridiculous, but given what we're finding out, because it's safe to talk about it now, this makes total sense. Continuing on. It says, I'll note that the G7 summit mentioned there was the same one. It says G7 summit. Oh, okay, I'm not reading that sentence right. So it says, I'll note that the G7 summit mentioned there we go, was the same one where Biden wandered off during a photo op, leading Red State and other conservative outlets to report on the incident. The White House and the mainstream press then spent weeks accusing us of spreading cheap fakes. Yeah, that's when the whole cheap fake thing started. And there's very clear, just irrefutable proof that he did just in fact wander off. And they're trying to tell you to ignore the evidence that of your eyes and your ears. It says, meanwhile, the former president was so far gone at the time that they had to use an on-demand makeup artist to make him appear somewhat alive for Zoom calls. I'm feeling just a bit vindicated as I write this, says the author of the article. Well, yeah, you were right the whole time, but it's always nice though to see the stuff that you suspected and were 99.9% sure was happening really was happening. So still there was one person who remained 1,000% behind Biden's re-election bid, and that's Jill Biden, who should be arrested for elder abuse. I mean, my God. It says First Lady Jill Biden was 1,000% behind it, of course. She didn't want to give up the good life. It says at the end of the day, I don't think anyone in that inner circle was presenting the president any contrary advice that this thing is not going to be easy, or maybe this is not the best thing for the Democratic Party, they said. How about just it wasn't good for him, given his mental condition? Jesus. Sorry, I got the sniffles there. Says that won't surprise anyone who followed her tenure as First Lady. To say she was ambitious and seemed to revel in living the high life on the taxpayer's dime would be an understatement. She wasn't the only one, though. Several of Biden's top advisors were also doing everything they could to hold on to power. It's a cliche, but this was a weekend at Bernie's going on in the White House with the former president's entire inner circle lying to the American people for personal gain. That's a very, very succinct way of putting it. Because it wasn't until Biden's historically bad debate performance that the dam finally broke. And everybody started to see what, the regular folks out there were seeing the whole time. Or I guess they were seeing it already, they just didn't want to say anything. So it says, of course, even with so much of it out in the open now, the press are still gaslighting about what transpired. It says party and administration officials repeatedly downplayed these worries, insisting Biden was fully capable of winning and serving another 4-year term in office. So imagine that they were, that there's, think about like what we all saw, and now that everything that you saw was in fact correct, even think about back then, they were saying, oh no, he was fine. He was totally fine. He could have kept going. Okay. It says, despite Biden's occasional public stumbles, they sought to assure the public that behind closed doors, Biden remained sharp and fully in command. He only happened to be fully in command and sharp when nobody saw him. Okay. And that Stephen L. Miller, whose tweet was above, he was one of the people that kept saying something like that, like to the effect of like, what he, every time they were like, oh no, he's sharp as a tack. He was the guy that was like, what, it just always happens behind closed doors. It says occasional public stumbles. Are they kidding? It says I wrote a story almost every day during the last few years of Biden's presidency on his senility, not because I loved covering the topic, because it got rather boring after a while, but because he had that many public stumbles to cover. It was a continual onslaught of material, and by 2024, I was dumbfounded they were still letting him do events at all. So, while these tell-all books are nice to finally see, I can't quite shake the frustration that no one will ultimately be held accountable for any of this. Yet no one's going to be. So is a swallow going to be pressed on why he didn't blow the whistle? Of course not, and he should be. Will Biden staffers be cast into the wilderness? On the contrary, most have already landed new positions. The biggest presidential scandal in modern history occurred, and it's being treated like a normal news story. It makes you wonder what they'll try to get away with next. Yeah, because it's different, with the D being, a capital D for Democrat. It's different. That's why they get away with it. And fortunately, there's not really anything we can do about it at this point. But if there's a way to get these people in trouble or to prosecute them for stuff, or to, I don't even know if that's the right thing, maybe just making them lose their jobs for, not actually being reporters, I'm all for it. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.